Good morning, guys. It is Friday, December 8th, 2023. This is Bathrobe Business. I got my coffee. Let's jump into the news. I did not have a post yesterday. Actually, I had a number of interesting stories, but I had a technical glitch. I thought I was recording the whole time, but it was not. And it was kind of funny because I was actually reporting breaking news, which I've never done before, and it didn't record any of it. So unfortunately, I did have to get to work, so I wasn't able to make a post. But I did save those stories, so we'll talk about them today. So let's jump into the news first. So Dow Jones is a little bit down, so it's going to be in regards to a story we're going to discuss in a minute. Dow Jones is at 36,496, S&P at 4637, Nasdaq is at 16,190. Oil still remains down. It is up a little bit, but still down. It's at 70.99 a barrel, so about $71 a barrel. That's a good price. I'm hoping it's going to keep going lower because I like that at the gas pump. And our favorite indicator, gold, is still remaining solid at that baseline of $2,040. I don't follow gold on a day-to-day, so I don't know what it's doing throughout the day. But literally every time I do a video with you guys, every time I post something in the morning, it's remaining at $2,040. For those that have not tuned in before, I'm not a gold advocate. All I say is that gold is a good thermometer on the health of the economy. When gold is above 2,000, the economy is kind of running a temperature. When gold is below 2,000, that means everything is healthy. The economy doesn't have a temperature. So and it's unrelated. A lot of people may think it's related to just inflation numbers or just daily stock market trends. It's actually not. On days that the market is up, gold can be up. On days when the stock market is down, like today, gold is remaining solid. So it doesn't really matter what's going on in the greater market on a day-to-day basis. Gold acts independently. Similar with crypto. The reason I don't talk about crypto is I don't know crypto as well. I know gold very well because of the business I'm in. I've been following gold since I was in high school, essentially. So because of that, I know the gold market very well on a day-to-day transaction basis. So that's why my history with gold goes back. I'm 36, but it goes back to pretty much when I was 16. So about 20 years. I'm not a commodities trader, but I know gold and I know alloy. So let's jump into the news. The first big story of today is the jobs number. So U.S. payroll is up again. So U.S. payrolls rose 199,000 in November, so 200,000 essentially. And the unemployment rate has fallen from 3.7%. Has fallen to 3.7% from 3.9%. This is above estimates. So every time I think I'm wrong about the economy and I think it is turning, some kind of data point comes out that proves it's not, that the economy actually is doing very strongly. Despite what some indicators may show, jobs are going to be driving this economy for a long time. No matter what happens in one sector, it seems to be compensated in another sector. We have a workers shortage. This is a demographic issue. And so because of that, workers are going to keep being in high demand. Numbers are going to keep getting driven up. And because of that, the economy can't shrink. It doesn't mean the economy is healthy. Inflation isn't necessarily good, but it seems like it's going to continue. This also echoes what I always say. I do not see a cut in the interest rate anytime soon. I do not know why Jeff Powell would when he's getting numbers this strong, especially when you look at how he's been raising rates. He has said pretty publicly he kind of wants a small recession. It's been alluded to many times, but he seems to be reacting to job numbers greater than anything else. He seems to be reacting to job numbers more severely than when he's looking at actual CPIs, which makes sense because if we actually look at it, CPI is kind of an engineered number. You can actually rig the system by weighting one item more than the other, by excluding certain items as non-necessities. So CPI, it's a feel-good number, but it's not an accurate measure of inflation. However, a job that has been added is a fairly accurate measure of inflation, and unemployment rate is a fairly accurate measure of inflation, because if unemployment keeps falling, that means the jobs are still empty. So in other words, there are not enough positions, enough people to fill the jobs, which is going to drive inflation. So I think Jeff Powell understands this better than anybody else, and he is not going to be cutting rates. I still think he could raise interest rates a quarter of a basis point in the new year. depending on what happens in the market. But that will be kind of dependent on the news stories that are coming out. But I don't see any reason why he would cut. There is literally no reason for him to cut, because the second he does, it's going to drive inflation even higher. Everybody is sitting on their house. Everybody is sitting, waiting to pull the trigger on new financing because they're under the assumption that rates are going to be falling. So the second there's a quarter percentage point cut or half a basis point cut, which is probably very unlikely, the floodgates are going to open and it's going to skyrocket inflation once again. So I don't think this cut that people keep dreaming of in 2024 is coming. It's going to remain fairly steady. You could make the argument that he can't raise much further simply because of U.S. debt. I think that's a fair argument. I've considered that myself, even before I've read about it, because obviously the U.S. debt is dependent on interest rates as well. But at the same time, I think inflation kind of cuts interest rate, U.S. debt, and so I think he's going to remain pretty steady on that. Next story actually kind of backs up what we've been talking about right now. It's in regards to mining. So I found this story very interesting because it directly echoes the shortage in workers. So U.S. has a serious mining worker shortage. This is on CNBC.com. I'm just going to read this little article, this little paragraph here. The U.S. is running out of miners. More than half of the nation's mining workforce, about 221,000 workers, is expected to retire by 2029. That's a staggering number. So if we have 221,000 miners in the United States, that means in 5 years we're going to only have 110,000. It's going to be halved. That is insane. That is going to mean more higher gold prices, higher prices on copper, aluminum, steel, literally you name it. And of course, that's going to spur underlying inflation as well, because all of your materials are going to be that much more expensive. That number is kind of staggering, especially when you consider the fact that we're all trying to move to EVs, specifically California. But I don't know how we're going to meet that if we have half the workforce we do now within the next 5 years. I found that number staggering. This is also very effective to Utah, because here in Utah we have Rio Tinto, which is part, I guess here we call it Kennecott Copper, which is owned by Rio Tinto. It's a large mining operation here in Salt Lake City. I think it's technically just outside of Salt Lake County, but literally you can probably see it from my house. And that's going to mean a huge economic impact here in Utah as well. Rio Tinto and Kennecott Copper are a major contributor to the local economy. So I don't know what that's going to mean when half of the miners are no longer there. Next story we're going to get to is, these are actually part of yesterday's stories. So Google is launching its largest and most capable AI model. So AI is still a very popular subject in the news. So they are calling it Gemini. Google announces the launch of its latest and most powerful AI model, Gemini, which has 3 sizes. So essentially, they're creating 3 different tiers of this AI, which, if I understand, is still going to be integrated with their current AI, Bard, which I have not used. I've talked about it actually on this channel that when ChatGPT was launched, they launched Bard as a competitor. It had already been running, I guess, internally with their own staff, but they were actually launching it to the public. I have not seen it. I have not used it. I haven't heard anybody talk about it outside of the news stories I read. But I guess this Gemini is going to be the underlying software for Bard. They're also launching an enterprise version and kind of a mid-market one that companies can use. So essentially, their ploy seems to be more to attack business than the consumer with OpenAI and ChatGPT, which I guess you could argue if it's a business model and all. I would argue it is. I know a lot of people talk about their unique structure and how they're a nonprofit. I think given the changes that have been happening there in the last few weeks shows that that is not true, and they are quickly shifting into a proper business and are not probably going to remain as a open foundation much longer. But I would say that their business model is to attack the consumer, whereas Google seems to be focusing entirely on business. I think it's an interesting play. We'll see if that actually works. I think a lot of businesses are going to be integrating AI, but I think in the consumer market, I feel drives business at every tier. Until consumers were using PCs heavily, businesses were not integrating them into their system at high efficiencies. It was really the PC market that drove computers, because IBM had existed for, I don't want to say 50 years by that point, but for a very long time. And businesses outside of major corporations were not integrating computing into their day-to-day operations until the PC market came along. Consumers were using them at home, and now they were bringing them into the business field as well. That's what really drove the market. I think AI is going to be similar. I would say that smartphones are no different. Everybody was avoiding apps until everybody had a phone in their pocket, and then all of a sudden every business on earth starts developing an app. So it's going to be interesting if this play is going to work. I would argue it doesn't. I think consumer markets drive business, but we will see. Next story. This one's interesting. So I like this story because I think it plays into a very interesting business model that is very much the spirit of the time. So McDonald's is opening, I don't know how to say this restaurant, CosMc? So I think it's a play on CosMc. I don't remember this character, even though it should be something I remember. I remember like Hamburger and Grimace, but apparently this is like an alien from the 80s and the 90s who was part of like Ronald McDonald's crew. And he was an alien that came to Earth to eat McDonald's. So McDonald's is launching this spin-off restaurant called CosMc, which is going to be, well, the thing is, it's going to be a light version of McDonald's, apparently, but they're being very secretive of the menu. I actually do have a picture in the link. It's from somebody's Twitter of the menu from the outside. So they're building a couple of these in Texas and I believe Illinois. They're doing like a beta test. So they're launching a couple of these restaurants, and somebody snapped a photo of the outside menu on the drive-thru. I guess it was already up. I don't think it was supposed to be. He snapped a picture, and it's on Twitter. I'm going to post the link. And looking at it, it really does seem like a smaller version of the McDonald's menu. I saw sandwiches there. I saw heavy drinks. So I'm wondering if they're playing into more of kind of a Starbucks competitor with this, so that it's going to be more coffees and juices than it is going to be food. But they're being very, very secretive about what this actually is, other than it's going to be a spin-off and it's going to be a nostalgia play. That's kind of the biggest thing, is that because they went with this character, it's supposed to be a throwback into the 90s. I don't know why they went with this character and not a character we already knew, but I think it is interesting that they keep doing these plays. So I really like this story because it seems that McDonald's has been playing into, I would say, disruptive marketing very well in recent years. I remember a couple of years ago they had the Travis Scott burger. It was like the way he does the Big Mac, or it was the way he does the double quarter pounder. They had 3 tiers of quarter pounders. Recently they did like a $16 burger. They, of course, last year had the Grimace shake, which was like all over Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. And they keep doing this disruptive marketing, which I think is very interesting because it's partly playing into a nostalgia play and is partly utilizing their history. I would say this is almost the Marvel effect coming into business, because they're able to create almost a franchise or kind of an event around their history and their products. I think it's a very interesting play. I don't know if it's going to pay off, especially with this character. Again, I don't understand why they would pick such a random, obscure character, not one of their more popular ones, especially with how popular Grimace was last year. Why they didn't do like an ice cream shop or something like that based off of the Grimace shake, I don't know. But they keep doing these interesting plays, and I think it's very interesting. And it's a really good business model. I think it really is very strategic for kind of the spirit of our times. Us millennials, we seem to be very nostalgic. I think we're more nostalgic than any other generation before us. That's a personal kind of reference, but I think we remember products from our childhood much more fondly than a lot of people do. Maybe fondly not even is the word, but it's a bigger play into our day-to-day lives. The fact that there's Disney adults that have risen up, the fact that Harry Potter is still such a big subject, I think is entirely based off of millennial culture. I don't think Gen Z or Gen X are the same. I think they are a little bit different. I think this is core to millennials, but seeing as how millennials have now come in to be a dominant force in the market, I would say the dominant force, I've talked about this before in the demographic breakdown from a video earlier this year. Millennials are probably, I would argue, the strongest purchasing group in the economy right now. And so it's not a surprise that companies like Marvel are incredibly powerful and popular. I don't think it's a coincidence that Marvel just dominates the market the way it is, because I think it plays heavily into millennial trends. McDonald's is doing the same thing now. And I think if you do follow this business model, if you have a rich history to draw on, like some of these heritage corporations, I think it's a very powerful play. Because as well, I've talked about in previous videos, the millennials are hungry for new products. They like innovation. They like disruptive products that kind of overthrow the Goliaths of the industry. I mean, how many different sunglasses are there? How many, Warby Parker, of course, being the famous one, I should say eyeglasses, but how many different sunglass companies, eyeglass companies, razor companies, soap companies, hygiene products have risen up in the last decade. And I think that's driven by millennials' desire for moving against status quo, moving against products that have been dominating the market, not your father's, not your grandfather's products. But this is a powerful way that major corporations can actually play against it by playing into the nostalgia factor, playing into, I think, a childhood arrested development that millennials can't seem to let go of. And I think it's a very powerful business model for any company that can utilize it. If I had this kind of a business model, I would definitely take advantage of it. Unfortunately, I'm mostly in B2B and healthcare, so I cannot. But I think that's very interesting to anyone that would be interested in that business model. I would love to hear your story. Next story is about our old friend Elon Musk. He's in the news a lot these days. In, I guess, not yesterday's post, but the previous post, I talked about his trouble with the unions in Europe. However, this kind of plays into his pocket because there's early murmurs of SpaceX going public. It's already been internally evaluated as a $175 billion company. This is probably for internal stocks and internal breakdown of the business, so rewarding employees if the company does go public. This isn't probably a full IPO yet. This is just for internal revenue and for internal rewards. But it just goes to show you that Elon Musk probably can do whatever he wants, because SpaceX now, another company in his portfolio, is already worth $175 billion in the private market. We all know if he does go public with this, it's probably going to double, if not triple. So with his money reserves, he really can do anything he wants. Not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that that is what it is. Next story is about just a small blurb about Salesforce and Mark Benioff. Just another company that is sort of changing corporate culture, moving away from work at home to work back into the office. And the article is on Bloomberg, just talks about how kind of the golden days of tech jobs are over. It's kind of funny. I've grown up in a culture, and I think most people have, where the tech industry has been a very cushy environment, and some would say very soft. They have flexible hours and unlimited PTO. They have, bars and restaurants within their own facilities on their campuses. And it seems that those models are breaking down, and it's tightening because these companies overhired. The industry has become saturated. AI is on the horizon. And a lot of these industries are changing, and there's a continued shrinkage in the market. We talked about in a previous video about how Spotify is going through more downsizing. And this is, again, in addition to all the downsizing that has happened in the tech industry in the last year and a half. It just seems to be continuing. It's not slowing. It seems to be just at a steady pace of decline. And then the last story is a very interesting story. This actually was a breaking news story as I was doing the video yesterday. I was reporting it, and then, of course, it didn't work. So this is about the Biden administration, but this isn't a political question. This is very much a business question. So the Biden administration is moving to essentially seize control of some pharmaceuticals. Now, that sounds very scary. That's kind of the headline. But in reality, what that essentially means is they are able to grab patents that they feel that companies have exploited government funds. So they're calling it march-in rights. So the march-in rights is essentially that if a drug company has used public money in manufacturing a product or for the fixing of its patent and is pricing the drugs incorrectly, then the government has marching rights to be able to seize those patents and kind of break up the monopoly, break up the patent, and be able to distribute generic brands. I didn't know how I felt about this, but the more I read the story, the more I actually kind of agree with it. I I'm a capitalist, same as anybody else. I wouldn't be doing a podcast on business if I wasn't. A lot of people always comment on the communist flag. For those that don't know, I was born in the Soviet Union. That's kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's actually my face on that flag, for those that don't know. That has a story behind it. But I actually do agree with this story. I think that if you are using public funds, you have very little leeway in what you can and can't do. If you're taking advantage of government money, free money, then yeah, I think you do owe a certain responsibility back to the government. Simply because if you don't want those restrictions, don't use government money. We can talk ad nauseum about if the COVID vaccine was good or bad. However, I see no reason why it should be patented, and I see why no reason why it should have been restricted. That was entirely government funded. I mean, virtually 100%. It was funded entirely by the government with billions and billions and billions of dollars. The technology was developed through government grants. These companies serve nothing more as manufacturing spheres. And I would say that there was no reason there should have been patents. They could have been paid for the manufacturing process of it. Of course, they should be. They were paid for the development and the research of it. However, there is no reason these things should have been patented. There's absolutely no argument for it. They would have meant, if they weren't patented, we would have had higher distribution, we would have had higher manufacturing of it, and we would have saved more lives. If you believe, I believe that the vaccines did save lives. Even if you don't, there's no reason why it should have been patented, because the restriction on those patents only slowed their distribution. So I am 100% actually for this. I feel like if you are using government funds, yeah, you're kind of at the whims of the government. That's kind of it. That's the last story I have of the day. I will see you guys on Monday, hopefully. You guys have a great weekend. Merry Christmas. We're in full holiday mode over here, so I hope you guys enjoy it while it lasts. Thanks, guys. Take care.